Tower defense games have a problem, especially on Roblox. And no, I'm not referring to the fact that literally every single TD game on Roblox is a derivative of TDS, which is a derivative of Tower Battles, which is a derivative of Bloons TD, which is a derivative of Rampart from the 1990s. Yes, nothing is original, go figure. But like I said, unoriginality is not the problem. The problem is that all of these games, every single one I mentioned, plays the exact same way. Whether you're playing Bloons TD or Anime World Tower Defense, regardless of one game being light years better than the other, the gameplay loop is still exactly the same. These games may call their towers different things, or have different maps, or have towers die, or literally just be battle cats in 3D, but they all suffer from the issue that they all play identically. I get that the appeal of tower defense games is the fact that you yourself aren't doing anything really when you're defending. And it's basically so you can just tab out and just do whatever while you're still technically playing a game, and it's cool, right? And I don't hate these games for playing all the same. I mean, I have 100% of Tower Battles and Tower Blitz. I'm an avid TDX enjoyer, and Plants vs. Zombies, Stick War Legacy, and Battle Cats are just my childhood. I even tolerate TDS from time to time. But the genre to me is getting stale, tiresome, and frankly, very played out. Fortunately, in 2021, a Roblox tower defense game decided to release, and this game broke the mold and became one of the best things ever in my opinion. That game is called Tower Galactica. Tower Galactica is a Roblox tower defense game that is unlike any other that I have ever played on or off Roblox. While at first it plays quite similarly to every other Roblox tower defense game, the game does something that none of these other games actually do, and innovates and changes the farther you get into it. It's absolutely incredible, and while unforgiving and questionable at times, overall TG works flawlessly for what it is, and everything it tries to do. Oh, and did I mention that this game's cancelled now? Why? Because we can't have nice things, that's why. I won't dwell on the cancellation too much for now, we'll get to that in a later point of the video, rest assured of that. The game still works and is functional to this day, and I really hope you give it a try. This video will be split into 3 sections. First, I'll go over all the mechanics present in the game. Second, I'll go over the towers, enemies, and maps in detail, and finally, I'll go over the lore and story of the game, as well as what could have been if the game wasn't cancelled. Ultimately, my goal with this video isn't to try and convince you that this is the best game ever or anything, because that's pretty subjective. Someone will inevitably play TG and think it is the worst thing ever, and that's okay. My goal here is to show you that it is objectively one of the most unique and original tower defense games, not necessarily that it is the best. So, yeah, without further ado, please be sure to like and subscribe, as this video took a heck of a lot of time to put together, and let's dive into it. Part 1. The mechanics. Most tower defense games have a specific gimmick that is meant to be the selling point of the game. For example, for Tower Battles, the selling point is the PvP mode. For Tower Blitz, the upgrade paths and the lore. For TDX, it's towers dying, upgrades, upgrade paths, and John Roblox. For World Tower Defense, it's basically Battle Cat, and it's hard as well, you get it. However, most of these gimmicks are things that have been listed on one hand. In Tower Galactica, if I listed off all the gimmicks, we'd be here all day. But you know what? Let me take a crack at it. Linear map progression based around a story mode, unique damage types, individual stat upgrades, flying enemies, and hidden enemies. Hidden enemies revealed with specific mechanics and otherwise being completely invisible. 3-dimensional tower ranges. Enemies that fly. Enemies that can kill towers. Enemies that can kill players. Yes, players. Player abilities and upgradable stats. Platforming. Enemies that do not follow the path and instead go straight for the player. Enemies that can attack and destroy the base without entering it. Naval towers. Yes, this game did it before TDX. Naval enemies. Enemy towers. Sea path for naval enemies. Enemies that can spawn halfway at the end of the track. Players getting corrupted and killed by going in the water. Players getting upgradable equipment. Quick time events. Enemies that don't move at all and their only goal in life is to eradicate the player. Enemies that steal money from you. And there's so much. There is so much to Tower Galactica. We would be here all day, genuinely. And keep in mind, this is a cancel game that was not even complete. Have I sold you on the game yet? So yeah. Tower Galactica quickly grows from just a normal tower defense game to essentially a bullet hell in a matter of minutes. And it's awesome. This is what Roblox tower defense games are missing, honestly. All these games give you full control of your avatar instead of giving you just a fixed camera perspective from the sky. But you really don't do anything other than stand there idly. Tower Galactica instead has your player character actively engaged at all times, making it a heck of a lot more exciting to play, at least in my opinion. Even before the bullet hell becomes a factor, this game is still very unique. Instead of just being random maps that you choose to play on, the game follows a linear progression, where the player visits different planets in sets called galaxies and advances through a story. We'll touch on the story more later, but this means that each planet has its own unique wave structure, enemies, and boss at the end. And, like I've said countless times, it makes everything feel so unique. As of the time it was cancelled, Galactica currently has 3 galaxies, each with 5 levels, meaning that there are a total of 15 different maps in this game, each with their own unique enemies and bosses. Towers are unlocked in batches as well. When starting the game for the first time, the player only has access to the Eachother troops, but after completing the first galaxy, they unlock the Nilian towers, and after that, Azarias. Oh yeah, I should probably explain these funny names real quick. The first galaxy is called Ilios and it's home to the Iliosians and the pompous king Iapetus. It serves as an introductory galaxy, so there's nothing particularly special about it. It also is the game at its lowest. It only gets better from here. The second galaxy is called Nilian, and it is the home of various enemies, demons, spirits, and cultists who have taken over. It's primarily a desert-themed galaxy with some variant planets thrown in there to spice things up. This is where the game introduces you to the concept of ghost enemies, enemies that don't follow the path, and enemies that try to attack the player. The third galaxy, Azaria, is home to the fish people. These fishes are kind of divided into 3 different tribes, one that uses modern technology, one that are pirates, and one that are Vikings. Azaria introduces the player to naval combat and expands the bullet hell elements. It is also home to the game's finale, Jotunheim. While this was not planned to be the finale for the game, it's still a fitting conclusion, and once again, we'll touch on it later. Each of these planets have challenges linked to them that you can gain special rewards from with these achievement stars. This allows you to buy secret skins as well as obtain 2 exclusive towers. Speaking of towers, I think it's about time we transition to the second part of this review, the towers and the enemies. Part 2. Exactly what I said earlier. The towers at first glance may appear to be just like any other Roblox TD game. However, they are anything but. Towers in Tower Galactica are treated more like specialists than units to place in massive quantities. Oftentimes, you'll only need 1 or 2 of each tower to complete a level because they are just that powerful. Tower Galactica, like most Roblox tower defense games, uses a damage type system for enemies. However, instead of limiting it to just DPS or splash, the towers deal damage with a type system similar to something like Pokemon, where enemies have resistances to certain attacks of a certain type, requiring players to bring a variety of towers and not solely focus on 1 or 2 high DPS ones. For example, the starter tower, the Recruit, actually ends up being the tower with the fastest fire rate. All the towers are very unique and pretty powerful at their higher levels, and each tower has at least one use for one planet where they're really good. The Tranquilizer and Missile Launcher from the first batch are standouts for how crazy insane their DPS is, as well as how useful they are throughout the entire game. From the second galaxy, units like the Caster, Scavenger, Orb of Sight get used the most, but the others are very powerful as well. This game also has a very unique take on an economy tower, with it being a wizard that increases the amount of money given from damaging and killing enemies. Azaria towers are the most niche since they only have use in Azaria, but all 3 are ridiculously strong with ludicrous abilities. We got a melee tower that cannot be stunned, deals 450 damage per swing, and has an ability with no range limit that shoots lightning at the closest enemy. It's crazy. But what would be crazy strong towers without crazy strong enemies? I already went over the broad strokes, but let me actually get into the specifics. We got Novelia, for example, the second planet in the Azaria galaxy, which introduces the player to yeeeeaaa, the boss of the level. yeeeeaaa rides in on a giant boat with 45,000 HP. This boat shoots cannons that lock onto the player and try and kill them, as well as an electric Gatling gun which homes in on your position. When it reaches the docks, the boat drops off yeeeeaaa, who begins moving at the same time as the boat to the base, meaning that the player has to defeat both of them at the same time. yeeeeaaa has 25,000 HP and moves quite fast compared to most bosses. He also has 3 abilities of his own, including shooting lightning at the player, being able to punch them, or picking them up with electricity and throwing them around. And this is just one level. Throughout the game, there are many different moments where absolutely insane things happen, stuff that would not be possible in any other Roblox tower defense game. Whether it's the Jester boss cloning himself endlessly, to Warlock and the cultist bombarding the player with lasers and teleportation attacks in pure darkness, to Albinage and his minions giving TD game bosses the fattest middle finger possible by just straight up ignoring the track and running straight for the player instead. The player isn't completely helpless though. In TG, you can upgrade their health, speed, placement range regeneration, and purchase movement abilities. These can help a lot with more tedious bullet hell challenges, and it gives Tower Galactica an added layer of depth to its mechanics. The final level of this game is a whole other level of insane, with not one, not two, but 3 final boss-worthy fights in just one map. Bernard is what the level builds to, Lura is annoying and should kill herself, and Ymir is just, well... Ymir is the final boss of Tower Galactica, throwing all conventions of tower defense aside for pure spectacle. Your towers just fire at him repeatedly, and you, the player, can't do anything but survive until he's defeated. It's a fun way to finish, and if you've saved enough lives for this point at least. And while not the finale the devs clearly planned on giving the story, it's a jaw-dropping spectacle at the end of a fantastic campaign. Speaking of campaign, Part 3. The Lore! Sorry, I really tried with that Matt Penn impression. Please give me credit for that. It wouldn't be a null video if I didn't talk about the lore. Tower Galactica does something different when it comes to the lore compared to other tower defense games that try to do the same thing. Instead of just putting walls of meaningless text in a text box for people to read, the developers actually took time to center the entire game around the story mode. There are cutscenes, the way dialogue, banter frequently drops casual story bombs, and there's a guidebook with the walls of text that give more context. This is a tasteful way of conveying a narrative, not being given excerpts of some lore document thrown into an enemy at random, but an actual story that the player progresses through and interacts with and learns to care about. I don't know if you can tell, but the story is probably my most favorite aspect of this game. I wonder why. PG's story is as follows. The universe is under the thumb of an evil empire known as the Bloody Galactica, who seek to control the universe and unite everyone under one regime. The player and their assistant Plavo go off on a journey to stop them, but crash in the Ilyosian galaxy. After injuring half the population, the player makes an alliance with the King Iapetus, and the group heads off to Nilian. It is revealed that the Ilyosians used to live in Nilian many centuries ago, however due to the rise of a cosmic being known as the Nilian God, who started a war against the other planets to subjugate them, the Ilyosians had to flee. The player encounters some of Iapetus's turned troops in Nilian, along with the cult that still remains. After freeing Somnia and Duhovnik, the player fights the leader of the cult and his 4 generals. Famnos proves to be too strong for the player's army to face on their own, so Iapetus sends in his own troops and assists in taking him down. After this, the group heads to Azaria, where we find out that the people have been fighting a rebellion against an evil dictator known as Captain. We learn in Novelia from a character named the Yazarian Elder that Captain is a puppet leader installed by the Bloody Galactica to control the galaxy in his stead. Azaria used to be ruled by a god named Yaziris before the source of his godly powers was stolen from him by the Bloody Galactica. The player battles their way through Captain's pawns placed in Gaslucia and Fursticat, where we learn that Captain made deals with the other tribes, as well as the Bloody Galactica. The game ends with the player toppling the Vikings in Jotunheim, although it's obvious that the story would have continued from here. Now, there's a lot of lost media for Tower Galactica, considering that the game was cancelled while the devs were in the process of remaking the first 2 galaxies to be on par with quality with the third. Some of this is public and some of it's not, but I'm going to share all of it because I don't care. Plus, it's been 2 years, I'm sure the developers don't mind, they're busy with the Unreal Engine version of the game anyways. It is known that the game would have been given an extensive prologue/tutorial to make up for the lackluster original one. Here, it would be shown that Plavo, our initial companion in the events of the story, was actually a super robot built by the Bloody Galactica scientists to be the ultimate weapon. Plavo escapes and lands on the planet Orbis, where he presumably meets the player, who is the king of Orbis, and the two get acquainted. For a known reason, they set out to other planets and land on Ilios. We know that Ilios would have been revamped to be more lively and have much more interesting gameplay. For example, Zlatus would see the player mining and moving down a path collecting rocks as they went, or Velica, where it's been described by the devs as being a guerrilla warfare themed map. No idea what that means, but it sounds awesome. For Nilian, based on the Duhovnik rework, it's safe to assume that each of the 4 Nilian planets would have had a cultist controlling the boss, with the goal being to win by killing each of the cultists and freeing the world's population. This would culminate in Spectrica, with instead of just being Iapetus' troops that come to help, all of the Nilian people and spirits the player freed would come to aid in the final boss against the Nilian god. For Azaria, we know that it would have had 1 more pirate planet, 1 more naval planet, and finally 1 final planet. Here, Captain would be found atop a massive battleship with harpoons that kill and reel in towers. The player would have to get a weapon and would wait for the ship to get in close, where they would board the boat and attack Captain. For the other two galaxies, we don't really know much. We know that Skydinia would have been themed around robots, and it would have been a similar vibe to the team's other game, Project Centuries Reborn. As for Bloody Galactica, we literally know nothing. I think the Bloody Galactica's leader's name is Relicus, but there's really not much else to it. I assume he would have transformed into a giant god, and then we would have had just a one-on-one showdown with him. I really don't know how that battle would have worked, but it would have been amazing. Honestly, looking back on the plans, it's honestly insane that any of this was planned for Roblox at all. And while I am definitely happy that the team has moved on from Roblox and they're making something of their own, it is quite sad that they have said that the game's not going to be a tower defense game, a bullet hell tower defense. It's just going to be an RTS. And honestly, that's what kind of makes me sad and really makes me think that it's just not going to be quite the same as Tower Galactica. Because Tower Galactica is something very special. There is no such thing as a bullet hell platformer tower defense with movement abilities and all that stuff. That just doesn't exist. No one ever has thought of that before. And no one will again, or at least without it being just a derivative of Tower Galactica. Unless they do something crazy original with it. When Tower Galactica was discontinued, we lost something special. And I hope this video either reminded you of how amazing this game was, or convinced you to try it out yourself. The game's still open, and even though it's not receiving updates, it still holds up. Nothing's broken, to my knowledge, and yeah. So, if you're feeling perky or particularly quirky, you can check this game out. Anyways, that's really going to be all I got for this video. This video is so long, I'm going to kill myself editing this. Anyways, be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys all next time. Bye!
Money in my bag!
Go for it.
Ooh, an